Today we're going to talk about e-cigarettes. First, let's get a sense of what you already know about e-cigarettes. So here's a pop quiz, true or false? Some e-cigarettes are safe for youth. False. All e-cigarettes are unsafe for youth. So let's talk about why they're unsafe. Today's presentation will cover 4 main topics. First, we'll talk about what e-cigarettes are. Next, we'll talk about why they're so dangerous for your health. Then we'll look at the factors that lead to e-cigarette use in the very first place. And finally, we'll talk about what you can do to avoid all tobacco products, including e-cigarettes, and how you can get involved to help others do the same. So let's begin. What is an e-cigarette? No matter what name you call it, it's an e-cigarette. E-cigarettes are known by several different names. You've probably heard them called e-cigs or vapes or just Juuls. E-cigarettes come in many shapes and sizes. Some e-cigarettes look like a regular tobacco product, like a cigarette. But in recent years, we've seen e-cigarettes look like other things, like USB flash drives, pens, and everyday items. Juul is one of the most common e-cigarettes shaped like a USB flash drive. Regardless of what you call them, these are all e-cigarettes and none are safe for people to use. Time for another pop quiz. Thinking about what's an e-cigarette, let's check to see what you already know. True or false? Most e-cigarettes contain nicotine. This is true. Most e-cigarettes contain nicotine, which is a very addictive drug found in regular cigarettes and other tobacco products. According to the CDC, 99% of e-cigarettes contain nicotine. That is especially important for you to understand because nicotine can harm your brain, which continues to develop until you're about 25 years old. So let's explore that a little bit more. So now that we know what e-cigarettes are and that they contain nicotine, what does it matter to you? Here you'll see the dictionary definition of nicotine. We don't expect you to know what all these things are, but it's important to have an understanding of what nicotine is before you can understand why using an e-cigarette is so risky. Nicotine is a drug found in tobacco plants. It's also frequently used in insecticides to kill bugs. So when you're hanging out with your friends, would you want to take a puff of insecticide? Also, you should know that nicotine is a drug found in tobacco products that makes them so addictive. That means that once you use it, your body will continue to crave it more. When you use an e-cigarette, nicotine is quickly absorbed into your body and goes directly to your brain. It activates areas of the brain that make you feel satisfied and happy. Putting nicotine in your body is dangerously addictive and can be also prime for your brain for addiction to other tobacco products or even drugs, like cocaine. So we've told you what nicotine is, but do you know that there are different types of nicotine? Some of you may have taken chemistry already, or maybe you're thinking of taking it in a few years. You may know about the pH scale, which measures what chemicals are in liquids, such as swimming pools or hot tubs. So why are we showing you this? Well, pH matters when it comes to how harsh nicotine is to your body, particularly your throat when you inhale it. Most nicotine cigarettes and e-cigarettes is what we call a free base nicotine, which means it's very blue on this pH scale. The bluer on the scale, the more volatile it'll be, which means it's harsher on your throat. And get this, the manufacturers of Juul have found a way around the harshness factor. They added a chemical to that nicotine, which then causes it to be red on the pH scale. By making it more red, it then becomes what we call nicotine salts rather than free base nicotine. And nicotine salts are less harsh on your throat. This is a particular concern for young people because it allows for nicotine to be used more easily, which increases the likelihood of trying an e-cigarette and getting addicted or hooked. All Juul e-cigarettes have a high level of nicotine, among the highest of e-cigarettes on the market. And Juul's nicotine liquid refills are called pods. A single Juul pod contains at least as much nicotine as a pack of 20 regular cigarettes. Think about that. Some other brands have even more nicotine. Now that we've learned about the risks of nicotine, let's talk about why that matters for your health. In this next section, we'll talk about a variety of risks from e-cig use. Let's start with the brain. Pop quiz time. True or false? Nicotine harms brain development. The answer is true. Remember, most e-cigarettes contain nicotine, which is highly addictive and can harm brain development. Right now, important growth is happening in each of your brains and will continue to happen until you're 25. The brain is the last organ in your body to develop fully. Exposing your brain to nicotine while it's in the most important developmental phase can cause an addiction and harm your brain. So think about it like this. Each time a new memory is created or a new skill is learned, stronger connections are built between your brain cells. Nicotine changes these connections. It changes the way they're formed, which can cause the parts of your brain that control attention and learning. Although adults may use nicotine products or patches to quit a habit, for youth, any exposure to nicotine is unsafe. Let's talk about addiction. Because addiction is a form of learning, young people can get addicted more easily than adults. The nicotine in an e-cigarette and other tobacco products can also prime your brain for addiction to other drugs like cocaine. And just like the ad says here, it's not like you can just go out and buy a new brain, so protect the one that you have. Another risk in using e-cigarettes is that many youth who use them are more likely to go on to smoke cigarettes, even if they say they never will. Use of 2 or more tobacco products is common among middle and high school students. Many young people who use e-cigarettes also end up smoking cigarettes. So the best thing to do to protect your health is to not use any tobacco product at all. No matter how it's delivered, whether it's an e-cigarette or cigarette, nicotine is harmful to your health. Pop quiz time! True or false? E-cigarettes create a harmless water vapor. The answer is false. E-cigarettes allow the user to exhale clouds that many think are just harmless water vapor. The tobacco industry prefers the term vapor because it implies it's harmless, but it's not. E-cigarettes create an aerosol, which is a mixture of particles in the air that can be harmful to your health. So do you really want to know what you're inhaling in your lungs when you use an e-cigarette? Besides nicotine, e-cigarette aerosol can contain cancer-causing chemicals, heavy metals, and ultra-fine particles that can be inhaled deeply into the lungs and harm your body. And even though e-cigarette aerosol generally contains fewer harmful chemicals than regular cigarettes, safer doesn't mean safe. This applies to both people using e-cigs as well as people who are exposed to secondhand aerosol from other people using an e-cigarette. Oh, and by the way, those flavorings in e-cigarettes aren't safe either. Your gut can handle a lot more than your lungs, and the flavors in e-liquids or the pods are not safe when inhaled. You may have already seen this next video, but let's go and watch it just in case you haven't.
There's an epidemic spreading. Scientists say it can change your brain. It can release dangerous chemicals like formaldehyde into your bloodstream. It can expose your lungs to acrolein, which can cause irreversible damage. It's not a parasite, not a virus, not an infection. It's vaping.
And if that isn't scary enough, even worse, children and adults have been poisoned by swallowing, breathing, or absorbing e-cigarette liquids through their skin and eyes. Just look at the increase in calls to poison control centers across the country where people call for help when they've been exposed to poisons or other harmful things. Since November 2020, there have been over 5,000 calls due to e-cigarettes, and it's increased over time. And if poisoning wasn't bad enough, defective e-cigarette batteries have caused fires and explosions, some of which happened when the e-cigarette batteries were being charged. Here are some of the real-life examples. Don't assume an e-cigarette device is safe. So what leads to e-cigarette use among young adults? We know that e-cigarette use has risen among youths, particularly in the past year. Since 2014, e-cigs have been the most commonly used tobacco product among our youth. And in the US, teens are about 7 times more likely to use e-cigarettes than adults. So why is this happening? Well, one of the main reasons is advertising. Teen exposure to e-cigarette advertising is increasing, and these messages come from different forms, whether it's signs, TV ads, movies, commercials, the internet, social media, magazines, everything with a cool image or even a newspaper. It's all around you. E-cigarette ads reach nearly 4 in 5 middle and high school students, and youth exposure to these ads has increased in recent years. So don't be fooled. E-cigarette companies are targeting you, and they're making a lot of money off of it. Here are a few examples of how they're doing it. E-cigarette marketing ads are using themes that include sexual content, independence, rebellion, and celebrity figures to appeal to the youth and young adults. Signs like this one in the middle, "Juul sold here," are also popping up at gas stations and convenience stores, making them easily accessible. Time for another pop quiz. True or false, the tobacco industry is in the e-cigarette game? The answer is true. Big tobacco companies are moving to e-cigarettes to addict a new generation of users, including teens. Some of the brands behind those new products are actually the same companies that produce traditional cigarettes. For example, the company that sells Kool sells Blue, Marlboro sells Mark 10, and Camel sells Views. Tobacco giant Altria, the maker of Marlboro cigarettes, paid $13 billion with a B dollars to get in on Juul. In addition to advertising, we also know that flavors influence youth. For example, many e-cigarettes contain fruit, candy, alcohol, or other flavors that you seem to find attractive and enticing. Most of your peers who use an e-cigarette are doing so because of the appeal to that flavor, and very few of them don't use flavors. So finally, what can you do about the problem of e-cigarettes? If you haven't started using tobacco, don't start. Most teens don't use e-cigarettes or other tobacco products. If you use e-cigarettes or other tobacco products, the sooner you quit, the better. Here are some helpful resources to help you quit. There's the This Is Quitting app from Truth Initiative, Quit Start app, or Smoke Free Text for Teens for smokefreeteens.gov. Most importantly, get help. Don't do it alone. Here are some things you can do that'll make a big impact on your journey. Asking for help isn't weak. It's a smart move. If you feel comfortable, talk to your friends or an adult that you trust about wanting to quit. It's normal for people to slip up when they're trying to quit. And if you slip up, don't think of it as a failure. It just means that you might want to try quitting in a different way. And be prepared to increase your chances of quitting successfully. Make a plan, stick with it, and keep trying to quit until you get it down. Make sure you avoid secondhand aerosol, which we know can contain harmful ingredients. Don't let your friends, or anyone for that matter, smoke or use an e-cigarette around you. You have the right to say, "Please don't smoke that around me." You can also avoid restaurants and other locations that allow the use of tobacco products, including e-cigarettes. We must ensure that our campuses continue to be tobacco-free, including the use of e-cigs. Now it's time for you to get involved. Talk to your peers, your community leaders, about the ways that you can help educate your community about the dangers of e-cigs. If you have friends that use an e-cigarette, talk to them about quitting. You can also become an ambassador with the campaign for tobacco-free kids to make the next generation tobacco-free. Before we go, let's recap what we've learned today. Are you still awake? E-cigarettes are a tobacco product that produce an aerosol by heating a liquid that typically contains nicotine flavorings and other chemicals. They can come in many shapes and sizes. Remember, e-cigarettes typically contain nicotine, a highly addictive and harmful chemical that can harm your brain, which continues to develop until you're 25. And the health risks include addiction, behavior risks, and exposure to harmful ingredients in our e-cigarette aerosols. Advertising and flavors make young people use those e-cigarettes. Live tobacco-free, get involved, and quit if you're currently using any type of tobacco product, which includes an e-cigarette. Don't forget the most important takeaway from this entire presentation. E-cigarette use poses a significant and avoidable health risk to you.